So, President, African Renaissance, when first did you come across the idea in the political history or your intellectual journey, that concept that of the rebirth of the African continent? Do you recall where were you when the epiphany, you come across a lot of ideas, but you're like, no. Do you recall the moment? Do you recall how the epiphany came? That fire.
No, I don't. I doubt if it would be. We can find that moment.
Okay.
It derives from an understanding that you see what happens. Africa gains its independence from around 1960, and then you get formed the Organization of African Unity. And what actually happens in terms of that unity issue is that they unite in the struggle to defeat colonialism and apartheid. There are all sorts of programs about economic integration and this and that and the other, but in reality, the continent united around this idea of the total liberation of Africa, practically. Mm-hmm. The consequence of that is that when South Africa gets liberated, it means this major task of the continent has been completed. That's what opens the way to do other things. That's where the Renaissance came from. Mm. That once South Africa was liberated, the continent that united around the idea of the total liberation of Africa, that task has been achieved. What next do you do? The continent must aim for its Renaissance. The liberation of South Africa opened the door to a Renaissance. That's where the idea came from.
And it's continental in scale. Maybe
it's a Renaissance of Africa.
And Africans everywhere.
The Africa must be reborn. Mm. After all of these years of slavery, of colonialism, of neocolonialism, and all of that, including apartheid in South Africa, we are rid of that political period. The politics is in our hands. What do we use that political power for? Is to give a rebirth to this continent, which was the continent in a sense died under the weight of all of these oppressive systems, exploitative systems. Now as Africans, now that we've completed the task of the total liberation of the continent with the liberation of South Africa, it opens the door to attend to the rebirth of the African continent. That's where the idea came from.
2025, an average, they call them all types of names. These citizens of the continent born after 2000, maybe some after 2010. They were not there when the World Cup, they were not there when you were the president. I saw some of them calling the current president cupcake. I was trying to trace that when the phenomena was arising, there must have been 3-4 years. But there are these growing population number of very, very young Africans. The continent as a whole, very, very young. Madagascar, Mali, and all of that. What should this concept say to them? Beginning with these ones here in Soweto, in Tanzania, who are facing all manner of problems. In the main, unemployment, that I grew until I was 25. I've never had a job. And faced with all these problems, what should African Renaissance say to them about where they must go?
No, I think the matter is very... The young people rebel in the way they are rebelling because this vision of an Africa reborn has not been achieved. And I think basically that's what the young people are saying. We've got our political liberation, we've got our presidents and parliaments and so on, but in fact, the continent has not been reborn. Otherwise, we would not be in this poverty, we would not be in this unemployment, we would be all of these negatives. So I think that's really basically what they are saying, and I think and they then act. You've seen it, they act against these political establishments. Now in Madagascar, and they've been acting in a number of countries to say the political leadership we have, it might be elected, but the political leadership we have is not addressing this matter of the renaissance of Africa, which would then address our concerns as young people to meet our needs in education, in employment, in everything. And I think the young people are correct. It's very important, though. I think it's very important indeed to make sure that the young people understand what it is they are engaged against. What is the struggle in which they're engaged? What is it intended to achieve? And how do you get there? I mean, you have the example on the African continent, for instance. You remember the so-called Arab Spring?
Yes.
The youth, it was the youth in North Africa, in Tunisia, in Egypt, that led that struggle. And you see what happened in Egypt with the removal of President Mubarak. It was the young people in the mass mobilization of people saying, no, no, no. The military intervened and sided with the people and then took power. So I'm saying that I think it's very important for these young people who are engaged in struggle to say the renaissance has not been achieved. That's why we've got these problems. And you, these political leaderships that sits there, you are not interested in this renaissance. So that's why they demonstrate against them, rebel against them. But I'm saying in rebelling against them, they must also say, what are we rebelling for? Otherwise, you have instances where they might struggle like that. And you see the same phenomenon in Sudan. Mass uprising and so on. But where are we today? So the consciousness, the political consciousness of these masses of the people in struggle, including the youth, we're struggling against something, sure. What are we struggling for, and how do we get it? I think that becomes a very important part of the agenda.
And then I suppose for us here in the foundation, this becomes an important point to emphasize the battle of ideas that needs to take place for this consciousness to answer. It's not an easy question to engage in, President. Otherwise, I don't think for Ghana, it's over half a century since 57. It's because it's difficult to say the morning after the President Mubarak is gone, what do we do now? But I mean,
the point is, I think, Mbuyiseni, the point I think about all of this is ideas are important. To think, to be able to think, to know the past, to know today, to think, is a critically important part, in addition to the toy-toying and all that. So in these young people, we've got to understand that. You can't be proud because you are ignorant of your past, of your history, to understand why have we failed. To understand that becomes very important because you can't create the new if you don't understand the importance of thinking, of ideas, of conceptualization of things, of a sense of direction. Where are we going? So I think it's very, very important indeed to emphasize on this, and it's a comprehensive challenge. I mean, you would have people in South Africa today, young people, like the ones you are talking about who were not born when I was president, who, because of the failure of the older people, have no consciousness, have no understanding of what was this apartheid system? How did it impact on the oppressed? All of those questions, does it still have, for instance, on the mind of the black people? Does that still have an effect on the mind of the black people today? There's none of that discussion is taking place. So you can't blame the young people that they're not exposed to that kind of understanding because the older generations are not communicating anything. And yet it is important for you to understand what it is that we need to do today, it's necessary to important to understand what happened yesterday.
What's wrong with our old people, President? I mean, it's as if the implication is like somebody somewhere is causing them not to conduct the struggle with a commitment, this commitment to creating the conditions of thinking for ourselves. That it's as if it's because what purpose does it serve that they do not insist on a knowledge-driven, intellectually driven political struggle, even to this day? That why would you preside over the youth that doesn't know what was apartheid, how it affected them, so that they know that it must not return? Otherwise, if they don't know it, they might think they are doing something new and they may be re-enslaving themselves. What was wrong? What happened to the older generations that you are referring to, such that they made this decision not to tell the truth?
No, I don't. It's not a decision. I do not think it was a conscious decision taken by a generation. It's our fault. I mean, I belong among that generation. It comes 1994. You are part of the leadership at the time, the black leadership. You are immediately faced with challenges of change. You've got to change this country for the better. You've got to serve the interests of the people and so on. The idea that there is this other task of consciously bringing up the young people, because this next generation is going to succeed you, that task falls behind. It gets ignored. I mean, that's literally what happened. You don't even think about it. Not even in sense of assuming that no, it will happen on its own. It's just not thought about. Look at our history. I don't remember at any point that we sit down as a political leadership at the time to say, let's look at the history that is taught in the schools, so that we can use that instrumentality to educate these young people who are being born now about where we come from. I don't think that we ever sat and talked about it, because we're preoccupied with there must be clean water, there must be a house, there must be a job, there must be this thing. You know, all of these immediate daily things. It's a mistake, I think, but particularly a mistake of the political leadership of the time, including myself, that we didn't say, in addition to all of these urgent things we've got to do, the task of properly bringing up the youth to understand that this youth is going to be the leaders of tomorrow. Therefore, it's necessary that they are properly prepared. In our case, we got prepared because you couldn't avoid it.
Oh, yeah.
There's apartheid in front of you, you got to engage and defeat it. So that's our political education. It happened, you couldn't avoid it. But once liberation comes, what is this engagement which exposes young people to this challenge? Tomorrow you are going to have to lead this country. How do you prepare yourself to get there? We say get a degree. So you might get a degree in accountancy. But is your political consciousness such that you are able to lead? You might be a very good accountant, but you don't know what to do about the country. I'm saying it's a fault of the older generation. I think we're too overwhelmed by what was immediate and practical and urgent, and didn't pay attention to this very important issue. But in any case, I don't think it's too late. It's never too late to mend.
Absolutely. But I think there was another form of negligence, President. I spoke recently to very conservative intellectuals. People under normal circumstances, we shouldn't take anything they say because they are right-wing. There would be intellectuals sponsoring very dangerous ideas. And this is where the negligence, I think, I'd like to converse with you. Amongst many things that they say, not about the very distant history, but the first 15 years of democratic South Africa. Cronje and Giliomi. Giliomi is a very well-known Afrikaner intellectual. They say they did a study to look at the conditions of Afrikaner people over many, many decades. And they say the living conditions of Afrikaner people in the first 15 years of democracy grew at a much faster pace and grew very, very high than they were ever, including under apartheid, but since 1910. You don't hear this from yourself. You don't hear this from the people who are the custodians of a democratic South Africa and the liberation movement. The second thing that they say, and these are conservatives, President, they say that age, 1994 to 2009, 2008, 2009, they say this age, by many, many markers, including a thing you always say. I remember you speaking to Gavin Mkari, complaining that, there are no investors, there were no investors, because the investors don't invest in a factory. They can just up and take their money and go, so they don't do that. But this guy says the fixed investment number relative to GDP of that age moved from 15% in 1994 under Madiba, and you left it at 23%. And he says, by measure of emerging economies, that's very, very high. He says, investment confidence is not measured by a national dialogue of investors who say, we love you, we're with you, Tumamina. He says, if you want to know whether investors believe in your program or not, that's the number we must look at.
Correct.
The last time that number was at 23% was in 2008. It's at 15%, back to where it was under apartheid. The democratic state seemingly doesn't either know that this was South Africa's golden age. Employment numbers, health, electricity connection, education, the middle class. They say the number of first generation middle class, like me, I was the first one to go to a university, which means, massive millions of people uplifted. The final thing they say, in that age, South Africa attained a fiscal stability that had never been witnessed since 1910, such that there was a budget surplus. They say you've never seen that, not in apartheid, not before. But this fiscal discipline was alongside a very long, aggressive program of social safety networks, social grants, NSFAS, which uplifted many, many people out of poverty. So you were saving, but at the same time, you were rolling out massive social programs. This is not the education you find out there. Was that not another moment of fundamental negligence to tell the story of the success of black people who ran the best state? Just for our confidence, President, that we were black, we're Africans, we can run a country. We did for 15 years. Here is the data. This story not there.
I don't think it was negligence. The phenomenon you're talking about, where the democratic state, democratic South Africa does not want to tell this good story of that first 15 years. It comes in the latter period. During the time we're in government, we talked about the achievements that were the things that were being achieved. For instance, Mbuyiseni, I remember, I might miss the date, might be wrong. When I delivered the State of the Nation address, 2004, I said it's a season of hope. It was not just rhetoric. I'm saying the country has entered into a season of hope because we can see what has been happening. That we're in this period of, it's hopeful. Tomorrow will be better than yesterday. We were using that kind of phrase. We're telling that story at the time. Never mind, I'm talking about myself. Look at the weekly letters I wrote to ANC Today. Every Friday you publish a letter. What are those letters about? They're about the contemporary situation at home and abroad. And you would find in those letters that we are recording the progress we're making, the difficulties we're experiencing, the solutions we're finding. The change comes with the change of the leadership after the ANC Polokwane Conference 2007. You have a different set of people in the political leadership who don't want to tell that good story. If you look at this first period we are talking about, and I'm saying just take one set of documents, the letters I wrote every week. Just look at them. And they will be telling a story of how the country is improving in every respect. And you'll see some I saw recently that somebody was complaining that I was very rough with business people. Because you'd get major white business people making wrong statements about the country. And I would challenge them. I say, no, you're misreading the country. Country is not negative, country is positive in this way and that way. I'm saying that story about that kind of South Africa was being told at that time. Then there was a change in the leadership. That change in the leadership produced many negatives. One of the negatives, what you call negligence, is not negligence. It's a conscious decision not to tell the truth about what happened in the past. You tell the stories you tell are the negative stories. So it was negligence. It's a change of political leadership, and that political leadership had a different narrative, completely different narrative. Indeed, a narrative which reflected what was happening to society. The economy going down, levels of unemployment increasing, levels of poverty increasing, and all of that during this latter period. And that's the story they tell. They don't tell the story of the earlier period, which was the direct opposite.
But what purpose does it serve? Maybe, President, if you remember, I'm not ANC. I'm saying that I come from a different... If I'm ANC, I want to tell the story. I want to recover what was good about it. I want to plug into the progress that was being made. I don't want to say apartheid was good. I don't want to say opposition is doing better than me. I want to say I did well, me, for a sustained 15 years. And I was about these conservatives. It's scary, President. They then make a projection. They say, had the economy grew in the way it did, GDP per capita would be here. Had it done this, these fixed investment ratio to the GDP would be here. They show you where you would be now had the fundamentals been put in place that were coming along that 15 years. How would you explain a leadership that wants to look at that with a sense of amnesia or decided amnesia? Why do they behave like that?
I think, Mbuyiseni, in a sense, we're afraid to tell the truth. The truth is this phrase that Foster used, too ghastly to contemplate. The change that happened with the ANC leadership in 2007 was real change. It put in place in the leadership of the ANC people who were not ANC, were afraid to tell that truth. You have this ANC led by people who are wearing ANC t-shirts, but they are not ANC. The way it happened was because there was a very, very systematic program on the part of the apartheid regime in its own defense to infiltrate the ANC and the rest of the liberation movement. Very, very heavy infiltration. As the ANC, we had all of the machineries. Let's check everybody who's joining and that. That was done. And some people were found and said, no, you can't belong among us. But there are many people who missed out. And some of them became part of the national leadership with the ANC in 2007. I'm talking about agents of the old regime. Were afraid to tell that truth. So this person who's wearing an ANC t-shirt, who's carrying a big ANC title, is not the ANC. This is a person who was infiltrated by the old order into the ANC, but now occupies a senior position in the ANC. And what's your task? The task is to repeat what their handler tells them to repeat. So you and I get surprised. It would be very, very logical, it's obvious, for the current ANC leadership to say, this is how well we did, until somebody else intervened to negate what we're doing. So the population will say, now we understand why things have gone wrong. We've been blaming you all the time. That's you and I think that would be the logical thing to do. But it doesn't happen. How do you explain it? I'm saying the way to explain it is if we lose this fear of telling the truth, to say the people who are not behaving logically, who are not saying, I did a good thing yesterday, and I would have done a good thing today, except that somebody else intervened to sabotage. He doesn't say that, and allows the blame to fall on himself. Or you are responsible for all of these bad things. Instead of saying, no, I'm not. They don't. And the reason they don't is because they belong among the bad people.
Maybe
That's
this...
the truth, that's the truth, you see. And I'm saying it's difficult to say it. When we talk about counter-revolution, that, from day one, from 1994, there are people from the old order who said, the ANC thinks it has won a war. It hasn't. In 1994, the ANC has won a battle, but we will win the war. And they intervened to make sure that they win the war. That's where we are today. The negatives that you see, as you say, that you have a certain period, first 15 years of our democracy, very positive. And the next 15 years, the opposite direction. Why? Why the sudden change? It's because the people were saying, the ANC thinks it has won the war, it hasn't. We will win the war. That's the result of that. To put in place your own people and put in place your own programs to make sure that this ANC, which they fought for 100 years, fails. And they are working together with their own people whom they had infiltrated into the ANC, who are now sitting in senior positions in the ANC. And you see it every day. You see it every day. You see, for instance, what's happened to the initiative for a national dialogue. Some people intervene to derail it because they don't want national dialogue to take place. Why? Who is this person who calls themselves progressive and doesn't want the ordinary people of South Africa to get together to say, we, the people, want South Africa to go this way? No, they don't want that. Who is this person? I'm saying it's a manifestation of the truth that we're afraid to tell. And I think it has to be told, and unfortunately, well, there's not enough people, I would say, maybe with the knowledge to kind of tell the truth that needs to be told. But it's a truth that needs to be told that the South Africans must understand what is the cause of this crisis in this country. If you don't answer that question correctly, you can't find the right answers.
You won't fix the country.
You won't fix it, you won't fix it. If you don't understand properly, what's the cause of all of this? You need to understand it. And I'm saying that we have to overcome this fear of telling the truth about ourselves.
There's a general who took all of us by surprise in this terrain of telling the truth, General Mkhwanazi. I wonder, President, part of the big crisis is precisely these civil servants who feel like were not supported. In this case, the politicians are not supporting us to fight the criminals.
Sure.
Because this is our constitutional duty. But we do all these things and they undermine the work of fighting drug dealers and all of that. Is maybe General Mkhwanazi some sign of this perhaps moment that might open up to speak the truth on behalf of civil servants, maybe in the movement of progressive forces in the country, to turn and say, but you are not progressive. You are part of the people that are holding.
I was very, very happy when General Mkhwanazi spoke the way he did, because of what he said, but also because it kind of sent the positive message that there are still South Africans among us who've got that kind of courage, that attachment to principle, who are ready to stand up and tell the truth as it is. In those two senses, I was very, very happy that Mkhwanazi did what he did. And I've said this publicly, that yes, I'm very, very glad he did this, and it's our task to follow up on what he said. And I think it must serve as inspiration to other people outside of the police, in the civil service, everywhere they are, to do this thing that Mkhwanazi has done, to tell the truth. Where are we? What's wrong? As we see it, he might be half wrong, half right, whatever it is, but to tell the truth as he says it. I think it should inspire other people to do the same thing. Because what he has done I think it is to put detail to things that many of us suspected. That there was a particular relationship between organized crime, the police services, political people. Is put facts to that kind of paradigm, which we suspected. It then enables you to act on it, because now you've got the hard facts to do it. I'm really hoping that it would inspire other people in the police and outside of the police to follow this example.
And speak the truth.
And tell the truth, to tell the truth about ourselves, because we are not telling the truth. We're not telling the truth about who we are.
You would have been in this this position. I don't know if I can risk putting you in a corner. After Mkhwanazi speaks, and you were the sitting head of state, what would you have done about Mkhwanazi?
No, well, I don't know if I can answer that question. I don't know. I doubt if I'd be able to answer it. I mean, first of all, I think if I were president, and there's General Mkhwanazi gives a press conference there, I would have said, can we meet, the two of us? And you tell me in detail, I listened to you in your press conference, now can we discuss it? And even get a national commissioner, this is your man, and get a proper understanding of this thing in its detail as head of state, as President of the Republic. Because obviously you have to act on it. You can't just say, I heard. You've got to do something, but to do something is much better to be as well informed as possible. That's what I would have done. And in that conversation, then I don't know what they would have said about Mkhwanazi, which would then give me the possibility to say, in which case, let me act in this way or the other way. But I think that's what I would have done. You would have to understand properly, not just rely on what you heard as you was talking, but to engage. You are head of state, you are head of government. You'd have to engage these people very directly.
Maybe the last part on this question is the ongoing debate then that arises about political interference. And because in essence, what the generals are saying is the disbandment of the political killings task team, which had up to that point received very good reviews from government, was shocking. That why would you want to disband it? Then they later discovered that all of that was to protect criminals. And they mention those criminals on the one hand. But then there's this idea that he intervened in police operations. But not only that, he may have done that maybe innocently, just overzealous. But they argue this other point. I think maybe someone else would determine that one, which was to protect organized criminals. But if you could maybe help us, President, constitutionally, what does political interference for ministers, political office bearers responsible for policy, blah, blah, blah? Because all civil servants, according to many, many reports in the Public Service Administration, Public Service Commission, say bureaucrats feel like there's this distrust on them to do their job, this constant interference with their job. They don't feel like CEOs with conscious activity. They are treated like children and all of that. But I thought maybe in the interest of that condition within the public service, someone must put to bed, where does the politician start and end? Where do the public servants begin of the type of responsibilities like provincial commissioners, national commissioners of the police?
The issue of time frames, Mbuyiseni, is important. I don't think we should make general statements as though the statement holds whether it's Monday or Friday, because situations change. Let me say, for instance, something that we don't say enough. The South African Constitution, the whole state system, the basic legislation, government processes, the ANC was very central in putting in place that kind of order. The current constitution could never have been approved against the will of the ANC. So we believed that when we say we sit in the Constitutional Assembly, 94, 95, 96, we would have meetings, Mbuyiseni as ANC, to say, there's this matter about property rights. How should it be expressed in the Constitution? Or let me even not talk about that. This issue about a constitutional democracy, the supremacy of the law, not the sovereignty of parliament and all of that. It is a very, very serious discussion in the organization. And the ANC deliberately, consciously, we said, let's go for a constitutional democracy. Because we know for a fact as the ANC we will be elected, we are already the majority. So we've got the possibility, we've got the mandate from the people to do whatever. But why do we assume that will always be correct? There must be some standard which is accepted nationally, which is going to must judge whether we are correct or not. We insisted on it. We'd insisted on it before the CODESA negotiations. We had said it was the ANC which said there must be accepted constitutional principles, which was the very first decision of CODESA. These are the constitutional principles we sent for. This is South Africa we want must be like this and this and that and that. And this might be binding on any constitution. That was an idea from the ANC. So I'm saying, the construct that you have about the relationship of the ministers to the DGs, government to police, is a construct of the ANC. So there's a particular period in our democracy where you will not find this complaint. That there was too much interference by the politicians in policing. Because it's contrary to the construct we put in place. A change happens, and the behavior begins to change. There are many complaints that you'll hear about today, which were not there in 2000. because you had that particular generation which had been responsible for writing that constitution and the rules and regulations and the laws and everything. Who put in place public protector, constitutional court? It's the same ANC. And so we believed in those things.
I thought Mr. Ramaphosa was a very central, is a founding member.
Well, he said it was chairing the Constitutional Assembly. But he was chairing the Constitutional Assembly, he was not in the ANC delegation. But I'm saying that people must understand that. So they are certain to take a very simple thing. I listened to the interviews under the Justice Zondo, that's on the commission, talking about this cadre deployment. We had a subcommittee of the National Executive Committee on deployment, because we're saying it's going to be very important to change, for instance, the senior civil service, to make it more representative of the population and so on. And the process that was put in place, Mbuyiseni, was, I'm talking about the government at the government level, just for instance, to choose DGs. Our deployment committee would say, we think Mbuyiseni Ndlozi would be a very good DG for health. The post is advertised, and many people respond. Our candidate is Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. Then you put together a committee of 3 ministers, Minister of Health and 2 others, who must then judge. There are 25 applications. So our person competes against the others. There's no interference. Then it's a government thing. The government process will decide who among these 25 is the best. And our person may lose. So you try to make sure that in selecting a person you put into that pool is somebody you think can succeed. Because you can't want a DG of health who's going to fail. Mm-hmm. We want a DG of health who's going to succeed in terms of the implementation of our policies. It was not cadre deployment. The deployment would be decided by the government structures as to whether this person is suitable to be in this job. So the ANC, of course, would lose some of those, because the ministers are sitting there, in addition to which, the 3 ministers sit, and they decide Mbuyiseni Ndlozi is the best, this was the second best or the third best. They take that to the cabinet. They say, cabinet, we shortlisted, these were the 3 people, but we think this is the best. And they have to explain to the cabinet why. Why do you think that one is the better one of the 3? So the process was not this thing that you're talking about. Cadre deployment, ANC just picks up anybody and inserts them there and then they've got a job. No. That process was because that we decided in the process of constructing this constitutional democracy, these are the correct things to do. And we did our best to make sure we observed what we ourselves had put in place as processes. A change happened. A change happened and produced a different kind of leadership of the ANC, which started doing wrong things, contrary to what the positions that the ANC had taken.
Today, maybe this is a good time to travel a bit far in the leadership of the ANC. It's OR's birthday. I heard you earlier speaking about the origins of the basic framework of the Constitution and CODESA, constitutional principles. And I read a book, Dear Comrade President, which actually outlines the origins of the South African Constitution and almost comes to a conclusion that if we were to say who is the father of South Africa's democracy, it would be OR.
Sure.
I don't know, President, if you want to say.
I think that's correct. I mean, that's what I say. That was, I think an understanding, Mbuyiseni, of this particular period in our history is very important. Sharpeville, the banning of the PAC, the banning of the ANC and all of that. And then what follows in this period, the virtual destruction of the liberation movement. What had been intended by the ANC as what was called the external mission when Oliver Tambo was sent outside the country by the ANC. It was called the external mission. That actually became the ANC. Because inside the country, there's so many arrests and in all of those things. So what became the ANC was what originally was the external mission. So you have a person, and Oliver Tambo leads that. So as a consequence of which, the ANC survives in the country. It says ANC grows in the country. ANC becomes very influential in the country to the point that by the 1980s, everybody says we must talk to the ANC in Lusaka. Same thing happens to the ANC globally. Nobody can move about South Africa globally without saying, what does the ANC think? Even these matters that people talk about, sometimes in disparaging terms, the role, for instance, of the armed struggle. It was not like the struggle in Vietnam or Angola or somewhere, because a different set of circumstances here. But the intervention of the military factor, I'm saying all of these things happened under the leadership of Oliver Tambo. Whether you are talking about the reconstruction of the ANC inside the country, the capacity of the ANC to lead the mass movement in the country, the capacity of the ANC to lead the world in the anti-apartheid struggle, all of these things are under the leadership of an Oliver Tambo, who manages to keep the leadership, originally the external mission, keeps this is in fact the leadership of the ANC through these years, and discharges all of these obligations. The thing that you were saying just now, at some point we say it's inevitable for the following reasons that the regime will want to negotiate. Yeah. When I speak to Oliver Tambo one day, I say, I've got a communication, somebody from the Afrikaners wants to see me and is indicating that the regime now wants to talk to the ANC. Do I go to the meeting? And he says to me that, he's had a nightmare for many years, that the conflict between ourselves, ANC, and the apartheid regime has been intense and over so many years, that even one day, he says to me, one day when the regime says, can we please talk, we will not understand them. And we'll say no. He says, I've always had this nightmare that we might miss this moment when we could resolve this problem because of this history. So go and talk to them, see them. Let's see what they've got to say. This is somebody, this is an outstanding leader. OR was never a showman and so on. He would never demonstrate how important he is and all that. But in terms of, OR was a great strategist, but also a great tactician at the same time. Not only the big vision of when to go, but how to get there. And really held not only the ANC together, but generally held the movement together. When we, as a part again of this thing of this leadership was providing, he says, look, it's inevitable regime is going to want to negotiate. It's important that we should be ahead of them in defining the conditions, whatever needs to be defined about those negotiations. That's how the Lusaka Manifesto was drafted. We're sitting in Lusaka, he said, let's draft this thing. The first port of call, we drafted what was the Lusaka the Harare Declaration. Yeah. We did the draft in Lusaka, and first country we went to consult was Tanzania. And we met the Prime Minister then, Ahmed Salim. And when we said to them, look, the regime at some point is bound to negotiate. So we must set the conditions for these negotiations. This must look like da. So we're consulting you. And their response was, no, but why, you comrades, why are you giving up on the struggle? You're already dreaming of negotiation. No, go and fight. He said, no, you of course will fight. It was Julius Nyerere who said the following day, nah, you are quite correct. You must prepare for this thing. But it was OR who saw that and said, let's prepare for it. And we had the Harare Declaration adopted by the whole world. That's the kind of person we had. So they are quite correct when they say the father of democracy was Oliver Tambo. It was. I'm saying the reason the ANC survived and was able to play all of these various roles domestically and internationally was because of his leadership.
President, you would agree, for every revolution that begins, it births a counter-revolution.
Sure.
From the beginning.
Absolutely.
How did OR succeed in resisting? I'm sure the counter-revolution would have imagined, as it does everywhere in the world, his elimination, his displacement. I mean, Lumumba, look at the Congo. The counter-revolution won there to remove this individual who imagines the Congo, Burkina Faso, Ghana. I wonder if with this state of the movement today, if you could say something about what in the leadership of OR that you've just brilliantly set out in actual concrete historical terms, resisted displacement. He's being displaced, he's being uprooted. Even if, some of them, isn't it, they get uprooted, but they are there. To consistently manage to do this thinking for himself, this powerful way of anticipating the enemy and propel a very principled anticipation based on your values. It didn't happen in the most dangerous times. I would argue when it should have happened. It happens when you are on the rise in South Africa's most important golden age. 2007 in your determination or so, counter-revolution. Why not OR? Why? Maybe they failed then.
I think OR had a much better sense of, a much better strategic sense. You would see it, for instance, in meetings, like the meetings of National Executive Committee. He would never ever speak first. He'd always speak last. And the consequence of that is that it would give space to all members of the NEC to say whatever. Nobody could say we're not allowed to talk and so on. And at the end, he would say, this is what I think. And in terms of saying what he thinks, even the wrong ones, the ones he thinks were wrong, he would take them on board so that they would also feel that, no, I was also listened to. What many people didn't know, that when for instance, you have that agenda of the NEC meeting that's circulated, I mean, the NEC is going to meet, these are the topics, that he would actually sit for 2-3 days working on each of them. He knows by the time he goes in meeting, he's already reached a conclusion of what his views are. People didn't know that. So he's prepared for this meeting, which is going to last for 3 hours. He spent the last 2 days preparing for it. So when he intervenes, he is mindful of what it is, what's necessary to say. So that even there are people there who say, he knows that these ones are going to oppose me. How do you handle them? You don't handle them by turning them into enemies. Handle them in such a way that they feel comfortable in this setting. You know, you had many instances of this kind. You had this group in the ANC which broke away after Morogoro 69, called the Gang of Eight. We engaged that group of the Gang of Eight until I think maybe 1972, 73. OR was refusing that they must be expelled. They were misbehaving very badly. He was refusing that they must be. No, let's engage them in discussion. Let's bring them back. Let's bring them back. So in that way, you plant the possibilities of the other side to act against him. But just one last instance. OR goes to a meeting of the OAU. I can't remember what country it was. And we had agreed that he's going to talk to Sesra Tsekhama of Botswana to say the ANC would like to establish an office in Gaborone, like all the other independent African states, which it did. And Sesra Tsekhama said, all right, write me a letter, send somebody to deliver the letter, and then we'll respond. But don't send one of these people who call us mohos, says Tsekhama. So what comes back, he says, Tsekhama has agreed, he must write a letter, but we're not going to send anybody who calls them moho. You know, these clever people from South Africa. You see what? And then one consequence of that is that the Botswana political leadership had 100% trust in OR. So even if the regime wanted to use the Botswana against him, they would fail. Because he understood what is it that we need to do in order to achieve our purposes. And one of the things that we had to do was to make sure that the enemy fails. The enemy will always fight against us, as you said. But we must make sure that the enemy fails. How do you do it? So I think he had a much better sense of what it is that needed to be done to make sure that the enemy doesn't succeed. We failed. We failed in that respect. I maybe underestimated the machinations of the other side and overestimated. In our case, I remember very well, as we went to Polokwane, I was saying that I can see all of this negativity. But once we engage the membership there in political discussion, we will succeed. What I didn't think about was that they would suppress the political discussion, make sure it doesn't happen. Yeah. So I think OR had a much better sense of what it is that he needed to do in order to make sure that the enemy doesn't intervene in a way that stops us from doing what we have to do. A tactical and a strategic posture. We went to the U.S. The U.S. government under Reagan, George Shultz was Secretary of State. And he says he's ready to meet Oliver Tambo. That's the first time ANC would meet with the U.S. government. So we went to the U.S. I was part of that delegation. Started in New York. And the first meeting we had in New York was with Henry Kissinger. So Kissinger says, Mr. Tambo, I've been asked by the State Department to meet you, to talk to you before you meet the Secretary of State Shultz. And what they want me to talk to you about is to say the ANC must break its links with the Soviet Union, with the South African Communist Party. That makes it possible for the US government to relate to you. Now, I'm supposed to discuss that with you so that by the time you get to Washington, I will give them a report of our discussion. But Mr. Tambo, I'm not going to raise a thing with you at all. This is Kissinger. The reason I'm not going to raise a thing with you is because I know what you're going to say. What you are going to say is, if the United States can please support us to wage this struggle against the apartheid regime, there'll be no need for us to go to the Soviet Union. That's all. So just leave it. It's Kissinger. And that was the end. So, but you see, I don't know what got Kissinger to think like that. Because indeed, OR would have responded like that. So I'm saying that to find the points of entry for the enemy to attack, somehow you have managed to be able to handle those things. So that they tell us now, people, for instance, the old order put upon people, they say they celebrated when he fell ill.
With the stroke.
They say with a stroke. Because what was worrying them was that you had an Oliver Tambo who could think. And so long as you had the leadership of the ANC that could think, we could never defeat the ANC. So that's what the Brudabond was saying. So when he fell sick, we celebrated. Because now he's gone, this person who can think. And he could think. And I think he outthought them even in terms of what we're talking about, of protecting the movement from attack, to derail it from the pursuit of its objectives. I'm very glad that at least you would note his birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday, because really this is the father of our democracy.
It's been an hour, Mr. President, but the Minister of Finance, just in 5 minutes, has had a very strange thing to say a couple of weeks ago, and I thought the ANC was going to say something, and certainly somebody with a sense of the origins of this constitution, somebody that would have been there with OR in these machinations and all of that. He says, no, we were wrong to say that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. This is the Minister of Finance. He says we should have agreed, we were wrong, and we should have, in the 80s, and gives this elaborate story about debates in the 80s, which doesn't speak to this history. There's no, we had a debate with Black Consciousness PAC people about this point, and maybe they were right. But President, the reason the finance minister goes to this extent to ask for this constitutional change, he says the country is overburdened. Because now everybody in the continent, I don't know why he says that, but he says people come because they think South Africa belongs to all who live in it. We must rethink that. So this country doesn't have resources to take care of the whole continent. My question to you, very directly, there is obviously a problem which I think emanated in your era as president, of the instability of Zimbabwe, which causes the people, because of the political problems there, despite political demonstrations, despite whatever, the state doesn't seem to get its act together. And therefore there's this constant help that they need. Is the reason why we've said so many times this point. But obviously there's that problem. My question really directly is, despite those problems, despite the fact that, we'll have, if there's a war in Mozambique, that would happen. If there's a war in Lesotho, that would. If there's a war, the CEO of the Border Management Authority says to me, there's never been a fence since South Africa was established in Namibia. But you don't have a problem of Namibians that are flocking your Botswana. So you can't say just putting a fence solves your problem, or the absence of a fence is because you've got that problem. You got to think a bit deeper. But maybe a very direct response to this reading by Kotongwane. He's presiding over the resources, and he seems to be saying to everybody that you are right. All these groups, you are right. South Africa must be closed. Obviously, our problems.
Obviously, the Minister of Finance is very, very wrong. You know, two things we say about this. You know, people maybe don't understand this. The commitment of the African continent to the liberation of South Africa is very strong. I'm talking about the commitment of the ordinary people, not governments and parties, the ordinary people. And there's a particular sentiment towards South Africa from the continent. A sense of ownership, of belonging. And you can't change it. It's right through the continent. South Africa belongs to all of us. It's our thing. And of course, it's more developed and all of this and the other thing. There is no way we as South Africans are going to stop Africans coming to South Africa. No way. I don't care how many electrical fences you build. It's going to happen. So the challenge we face as South Africans is to how do we deal with that? You can't keep these fellow Africans out of South Africa, and you can't define our relationship with South Africa versus the other Africans as enemies. These are our enemies who've come to our country to take our jobs and all of that. They will come. I'm saying I don't care how many electrical fences you build. With the challenge we face, what is it that we do in order to respond to that problem? You know, there was this issue was discussed in KZN. And the commission was formed under Judge Navi Pillay a few years back. And this matter was raised. There are so many people from the rest of the continent who are in KZN. And they are here, and you can't drive them away. How do we handle this issue? And the Navi Pillay Commission said, in order to deal with this real challenge, the other Africans will come. Doesn't matter what we do. You can chase them away today they are back tomorrow. So it's an issue and she made a suggestion, the commission. This is how we should do it, to integrate properly, to do this, and negotiate with the neighboring countries, all of that. That's the correct way to come at it. And you can't come at it via the Tutula way. The Tutula way is not going to work. In addition to which, when I talk about the change in 2007, change of political leadership. This matter, chase away these other Africans, is part of the agenda of the counter-revolution. Because they wanted to destroy the Africa policy of the ANC. It's very much part of that agenda. The last thing I'd like to say, maybe I must talk to the Minister of Finance. There's a very important book by Professor Mahmoud Mamdani of Uganda, who talks about settler colonialism, that book, and discusses the US as an example of settler colonialism, Israel as an example of settler colonialism, South Africa as an example of, and he says, of all of these examples, how to respond to the historical reality of settler colonialism. The only ones who got it right are the South Africans. Exactly this point.
Citizen and subject.
It says it's the South Africans who've got this thing right. Because look at what has happened, the Americans have done to destroy the Native American population. Look at what's happened to Israel and Palestine now. And Mahmoud says the only ones who understood correctly how do you deal with the consequences of settler colonialism.
Oh, yes.
And he's right, maybe we should give that book to the Minister of Finance, and it might teach him something.
Yeah. So, President, we'll have you in the podcast once a month.
You'll have to pay me.
I thought pensioners don't have financial needs.
No. With a cup of rooibos tea, we'll be fine.
I think we can arrange that. We can arrange that.
That's good.
Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Okay, Chief.
Yeah.
I'm sure we went over an hour.
It's 1 hour, 9 minutes.
Oh, that's not so bad.
It's not so bad.
Not so bad.
Yeah, because we wanted to ask about the 10-point plan. Is it a 9-point plan?
10 points.
10-point plan.
It's okay. We can still be alive in a month's time.
It will. It certainly will, including many other issues. Yeah. But
okay,
that's it. Thank you so much, President. We should release you.
Yeah. You want the picture? Okay, we stand there.
Oh, yeah. You add the ties. There's a statue of him.
That one doesn't look like me.
And I think this is OR.
That's OR, yeah. That's more or less okay.
Yeah.
That's OR. We're only looking at this camera, not those others.
Yes.